you go. Welcome back, everybody, to JH Consulting. And today I have a special guest, one of my advisors. Her name's Vicky. So, Vicky, share with us a little bit about your background in the sport of gymnastics, how you got to college coaching and JH Consulting.
Yeah. So thanks for having me. Um, so I am from Canada originally and grew up in the gym, started when I was, parent and taught kind of thing. And knew I wanted to continue in the sport, but Canada
Mhm.
does not have college gymnastics in the same way that the US does. So I knew that if I wanted to continue, I'd have to come to the US. But um, my coach had nobody before me that wanted to do college gymnastics, and so we didn't know what we were doing.
Mhm.
And there were really no resources back then, so we ultimately just started the process much too late. Kind of thinking, oh, well, you go to college after high school, so of course, like, let's start this process in your last year of high school.
Mhm.
And of course, coming from Canada and the exchange rate and needing some sort of scholarship, it was just too late. So I ended up staying in Canada, uh, competed for my club through college because I wasn't ready to be done.
Mhm.
And then knew I wanted to coach. So came to the US after I graduated college, and I got to live out my dream of being a Division I college coach for 16 years. Um, During that time, I, had a lot of Canadians that would send in their stuff.
Mhm.
And I was sitting there and I was like, oh my gosh, this athlete is like so talented and amazing, and they need a scholarship, and it's too late. I don't
Mhm.
have any more. They're gone. The same thing, they would just start the process later.
Mhm.
And so, that happened several times as I was coaching.
Mhm.
Um, and so then ended up transitioning from coaching to doing this when my husband and I started a family. So I love that I've been able to kind of come full circle and help families through the process where there weren't resources for. I do work with with our Canadians, and love being able to give that information and knowledge back to them so that they have more of an opportunity, and
Mhm.
being too late to the process isn't one of the obstacles. um,
Great.
and then I was lucky enough when I was coaching to get to be on the NCAA women's gymnastics committee, so
Mm.
um, got to go through that role and see how everything kind of goes through, from the meetings the coaches have through the NCAA, host the NCAA national championships. And then once I finished coaching as well, started judging. So am a level 10 in collegiate judge.
That's so great. You bring so much to our team here, and I really love that you come from Canada because I agree with you. When I was a head coach doing recruiting, always Canadians would come across our emails, and I felt like it was just a unique way we had to recruit them a little bit differently because they're considered international and the visas and just all the things that go into, not being in the United States as a USAG type, recruit. So it's a huge area that we at JH Consulting, hopefully fill a need there. What would you say would be the right time for a Canadian to get started with us here at JH Consulting in the recruiting process?
Yeah, so I know we say for everyone, usually level 9 or ninth grade.
Hmm.
I usually try to say for Canadians maybe a little bit earlier, like kind of finishing up eighth grade, so that we really can talk about those summer camps that summer going
Hmm.
into grade 9 for them, just because it's totally different in Canada. You don't typically, even just going off to college, you don't go around and visit colleges and universities the way you would here in the US. It's just not really what you do. You apply to different colleges and you pick the one to go to, kind of thing. And so visiting happens here and there, but not quite the same way it is here. So, um, I think them getting to come and kind of get into the rhythm of knowing, okay, I have to go on some visits. I need to get on some campuses and see what they're like, because they're also, a lot of the universities here are much larger than the universities in Canada. And so I think really making sure that summer going into high school can be a summer that they can really use to help them in the process and know exactly what they are really going to need
Mhm.
skill wise, because while we know there's modifications from the level 10 rules here for college, I feel like it's even like half a step even more removed from what the requirements are in Canada. So
Yeah.
knowing those requirements a little bit earlier so that they have the time to then be able
Mhm.
to get those skills to really give them the best shot at getting a scholarship, because again, that exchange rate is not in their favor.
Mhm.
Um, that, they kind of just need to know that information just a little bit earlier.
Mhm. So you mentioned the rules are a little bit different. For Canadian, maybe their, regular type of rules for their levels. And then we hear level 10s and the college rules and the college modifications. Let's go into some of those. First of all, maybe share. I realize a lot of people don't understand. We go to these meetings as coaches in college here in the United States once a year, and we have major discussions about how to keep our sport moving forward and be something that's very marketable, especially now, to keep with all the changes that happened with that lawsuit. Sports are changing here in the United States. The NCAA is changing. And in order for our sport or the sports we represent, there's all different ways to stay like a hot item for our athletic directors and for the NCAA. And one of them is making adjustments to what we require as college coaches. We call them modifications when we're college coaches. So I don't know if you've been reading Greg Marsden's stuff on Instagram, but he's always been a pioneer in this area because he sort of sees ahead of, I think he doesn't have his focus even as a successful college coach at Utah. He was the head coach for years and they won many championships. So he knew what he was doing as a coach. But he also, I remember at all the coaches' meetings, he was the guy who really tried to speak on behalf of some of these modifications so that we would be more exciting to the public and that they'd want to come watch meets. So that's really a lot of the push for the some of these adjustments. Others are for safety and I think for keeping our college gymnasts healthy. But share with us, Vicki, some of the um, different modifications that we have right now, and then we know that they will vote on them this summer. They might change.
Yeah. So the important thing for all our families to know is that the college coaches are going to be watching these level 10 routines and looking at it from not just do they fill all the requirements for level 10, both special requirements and compositional requirements, but also, and more importantly, do they follow what those modifications are for college?
Mhm.
Because they want to see that proof in competition that they're going to have a routine that they can use that fulfills what they need in college.
Mhm.
And so the big things are, of course, we know that the vault, your chankle out full, your chankle out half are both 995s currently
Mhm.
in college. Both are 10 start values in level 10. So there is a small difference there. And then as a result, the Yurchenko tuck full is a 9.9. And, it kind of snowballs like that. So now, more coaches are trying to recruit that Yurchenko 1.5, Yurchenko double. We're seeing more of those now in college. And those are the 10 start values. And,
Mhm.
if in a lineup when you put six girls up and five girls count, if one team has five really strong Yurchenko out fulls and the other team has 5 Yurchenko 1.5s, I mean, you're down a half a fall before you even
Hmm.
touch the equipment. And so coaches are really pushing for that 10-0 start value, because that is a place that they can make up some difference right now. Bars, they are putting a priority on a single bar release.
Hmm.
Right now, they can do either a single bar release or 2D releases. Um, so that's what they're kind of looking for from a release standpoint. And obviously, they're level 10, there's a requirement to have two releases, but they don't need to be Ds specifically.
Hmm.
Um, and then in college for the dismount, they want an upgraded dismount too. So in college, it does not meet special requirement if you giant into a double salto. Um, you would need to put some sort of circling element before it. And then for composition, they would need a D circling element. So a giant full or um, clear hip full, toe handstand full, something like that. Stalder is something we don't see very often. That
Hmm.
is a skill that has been valued differently in college. That's a D. So that is something that they could do for those girls that are strong with Stalders. But generally speaking, the coaches are going to want that big E dismount, the double layout or the full in
Hmm.
um, for bars. Um, Beam is honestly quite pretty similar to what is required in level 10. I think really the biggest change that has happened is that um, college kind of started the aerial cartwheel back full, the D acro skill into a B dismount. Um, and then, of course, lots of people started doing it. And so then they made the change. But meanwhile, the USAG system had seen all these college girls do it. So now all these level 10s started doing it. And then college switched it and said, nope, you can't do that. You still have to have a C.
Hmm.
So, you know, this past year, athletes have been able to do that in level 10, but doesn't meet the requirement in college anymore. Um, and then for floor, they're looking for two Ds. And a lot of times they would prefer those Ds to be tumbling passes.
Hmm.
The requirement is only one has to be acro. The other one could be dance. But they're really looking for multiple D tumbling passes, or of
Hmm.
course E's.
Hmm.
And then one of the things that catches girls a little bit too is that um, the front pike in level 9 and level 10 is a B skill, but in college it's only an A. So they have gone through level 9 and level 10, getting, say, 2/10 bonus for 1.5 front pike. And now they go to college and they're only getting 1/10. So needing to change that front pike into a front layout in order to get the same kind of value that they're getting currently in the USAG system. So that's kind of the biggest things that are differences here between the level 10 rules and the college rules. And then where they're a little bit more different for Canada specifically is Canada has a lot more compositional requirements. Um,
Hmm.
and they put a lot more emphasis on artistry. And so it
Hmm.
is very common for a very, very strong level 10 routine to have a compositional deduction in it, just
Hmm.
because those compositional requirements are so hard. And then they can lose up to almost a whole fall in artistry on beam and floor.
Hmm.
So the judging and the scores are quite a bit different too. So for a Canadian, a 36 is huge.
Hmm.
Whereas here, of course, we're seeing high 37s, 38s, 39s even. So
Hmm.
um, that's where some of the differences lie.
That's so interesting. It's a good refresher even for me because I don't deal with the Canadians and whew, that there's some, things here for the United States girls too, obviously, on each event. And I love those updates. Those are really helpful. I think as a parent, these things are good for everybody to know and be aware of, but how would you recommend they approach their club coach who might not be putting together routines that are going to fit for recruiting purposes if they need these up to the level, you know, combat or just skills I want to say, or because a lot of times I think what parents don't realize is how hard gymnastics is. You can't just walk in and say, "Oh, I heard this podcast. I need to have a blah blah blah." But some of them are adjustable, right? But a lot of them take time. And we can't, as a parent, just walk up to the coach and say, "How come you didn't, let us know that this is not up, or my daughter's not up to the level and she's trying to get recruited." What would you recommend, like a parent, how they would approach that?
Well, I think that's one of the reasons why starting early is important, so that
Mm,
they know that and they can have those conversations. Usually every year at the end of season, there's a meeting, and what are the goals for the summer and the plans for the next year as far as going to the next level and stuff. And so I think
hmm
generally knowing some of that stuff so that those conversations can include the athlete's goal to go on to college, and what that would look like to get there. Um, but it is difficult, and I tell the athletes, especially those Canadians, where their requirements might not need what the college coaches are
hmm
looking for. And I tell them, like, your coach's job is to prepare you for your requirements and your competitions.
hmm
And obviously you're trying to qualify on to nationals and things with
hmm
your roles. And so it does put, the onus on the athlete to do
hmm
those skills that they might not need um, for their requirements, and do them really well so that their coaches don't have to worry about not putting them in because they're worried about making a mistake, you
mm,
know. But I think when you approach it from the aspect of, this is the athlete's goal and we're all here together in order to try to help them reach that goal. Um, and again, it can be done a little earlier, so it's not like we need to make these changes now. Like, there's a plan in place, in order to be able to have the athlete have the goals that they're looking for, both within the system in level 10 that they're competing, or
hmm
the high performance stream that they're in, or with college too.
Right. Also, college coaches can see pretty quickly if they can adjust somebody once they get to college to what they need. There so many times that's going through the college coach's head. So I always encourage our clients to be sure to be posting additional skills on the side. So let's say they're not putting them in their routine right now, but they can do them pretty well on the side for whatever reason. Be sure you're posting those now that you do know what some of these up to the level skills are. And then some of them you just aren't going to be able to, not everyone is going to have those skills up to the level for the highest Division One schools, for example. But there's a lot of schools. There's a lot of divisions. There's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of options. So don't feel that, obviously do your best as an athlete, do your best to encourage your athlete as a parent to, have these conversations, not during season, but maybe, like you said, getting started early so and then trusting your coach as you go through the process. Um, and then if you're in the thick of recruiting and you're hearing this for the first time, maybe work on some of this stuff in the summer or talk about it in your emails that you're going to add this in or that in later. And college coaches are always used to that for sure.
Yeah.
All
And
right.
I've definitely had some girls who
Mm-hmm.
their coaches were very open to changes. And so,
Mm-hmm.
in our sessions, we came up with, okay, based on this routine that you're doing for
Mm-hmm.
your stuff, here are some options of what your routine could look like in college that would meet their requirements.
Mm-hmm.
And the club coach has then allowed those athletes to maybe warm up in practice with
Ah.
that quote unquote college routine,
Mm-hmm.
so that they could still see that full routine being
Mm.
done.
Smart.
But then, of
Mhm.
course, go back to their
Yeah.
um, routine that they need in competition. And that way, the college coaches can still see that full routine being done, um, that gives them what they need.
Ooh, I like that. And video it. Have somebody videoing when you're
Mhm.
warming up, even at a meet. That's
Yeah.
great. I do love, I mean, you don't just work with Canadians. You work with a lot of our international from all over different countries, and of course, our girls here in the US. Um, but I mean, I just spoke to an athlete from Switzerland. She trains in Austria. She's beautiful. The artistry, you said it.
Mhm.
Canada too. They
Mhm.
really stand out in their artistry in comparison. And so,
Yes,
all of you who are listening to this, who might be international, wanting to do, gymnastics here in the US, just know that college coaches just love, what you bring to the table in terms of that. It's beautiful and it can help your score here too now. So, it's a great quality that you guys work on way more, it seems like, than we do here.
for sure.
So, that's a good thing. What is your best advice for, let's say, a 2028 recruit? I guess it could also apply to the 27s, but let's start with the 28s. What would you recommend?
I think my best advice for the 28th is to not make June 15th bigger than it is. It's
Mm,
just it's just a starting point.
mhm,
It's, you know, not the most important day in the process. It's just
mhm.
one day in the process.
I
And
agree. Mhm,
what may or may not happen on June 15th might actually have nothing to do with where you end up committing and being
mhm,
recruited to. And that, um, you know, everyone's only posting their highlight reel on Instagram. And so, taking what you see being put out there, knowing that that's what it is, it's everyone's highlight reel. And that's not what every day looks like for those athletes either.
mhm,
you know so trying not to compare yourself to seeing what other people are posting about, maybe somebody else got a phone call or whatever. um, of course that athlete's going to maybe highlight that, but what we don't know is maybe their top 5 schools they didn't hear anything from, right?
right.
And it was a school that reached out to them that wasn't on their list, and isn't something that they're necessarily considering at this point.
Mhm,
But of course they want to put it out there that they had that call, and everyone else is sitting behind and thinking,
mhm.
oh well, that I didn't get anything or whatever. And it really is just day one. It's not um,
Yep, that's
it's
good.
not as big as everyone
I
seems,
like that.
plays
Mhm.
that off.
We were just talking at our staff meeting yesterday about the importance of phone calls and visits and getting prepared for those. I would say 80% of the time when we're working with JH girls, they're often not really sure of themselves. They're not, how could they be? They've never interviewed for a job, they've never interviewed for, you know, anything that usually along those kind of lines. And so, one of the things we do here at JH Consulting is spend time with them going over what we know these college coaches are probably going to be asking. And so, I think that's one of my favorite sessions with our girls because we have them fill out that one PDF that we've put together, and then they have to come to the next session and not look at their answers, and it's fun stuff. It's not hard stuff for them, but it really does prepare them for college coaches, those phone calls, or even when they're on visits. So I think that's one part of June 15th that we like to really benefit our girls with. But also after that it is competitive, so if they match up with several girls start value wise, score wise, but their personality or their ability to answer those kind of questions can really be a deal breaker for some of these college coaches. And I want to, just move right into the topic of confidence and leadership because recently I spoke to two Division I coaches, and they flat out told me they are losing their leadership. They're graduating. And so the athletes they're going to pick better come to the table with leadership qualities. And so I've been thinking about that a lot because, I have some athletes that want to go to their college. But when I bring up the topic, I don't know if you notice this, but they know that's important. They hear that all the time, that being a leader is important, but they don't know how to transfer that over into a conversation with a college coach. because they feel like they're bragging or something.
Mhm. Yep.
Um, so
Or that they're saying, I get a lot like, I'm not saying somebody else isn't doing this. I'm just saying I can.
yeah,
They feel like they're putting somebody else down because they're talking about themselves.
we were both head coaches. We were both assistant coaches, and I bet we could share a lot of stories of the teams that really thrived. And it wasn't always about their skills. It was about the leadership on the team in the locker room when they were had a bad event and how they came back and then won a meet or were successful. Wouldn't you say, I mean, as a head coach, when you find the whole package, the athlete, the artistry, the up to the level, and the leadership, in a recruit that you're talking to, it's like winning the lottery. It really,
It's a game changer.
it's a game changer. So share with our audience, do you have any tips on that, on how to communicate um, your leadership strengths as a person to the college coach?
Yeah, I think that a lot of times the girls don't necessarily realize that they have a lot of experience in this.
Mm-hmm.
Just by what is happening maybe every single day in the gym,
Mm-hmm.
as far as like, growing up and then suddenly they're one of the older ones and they might be the ones that are leading warm-ups in the gym
Mm-hmm.
or, being in charge of the conditioning group because the coach has to go over to, coach a different event or whatever. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that they just see a lot of those things as just part of practice and
Mm-hmm.
doesn't necessarily recognize that they are actually building those leadership skills, um, and that there's some of those very same things in college as far as leading the warm up in practice or in a competition or being that um, motivating voice during conditioning when things are hard and
Mm-hmm.
you're the one that's yelling to keep the energy up for everybody. And so I think the girls have a lot more than they think they necessarily do. Um, and I find one way that at least the girls that I've worked with have found it a little bit easier to say to coaches is, my coaches have said to me that I have
Mm-hmm.
whatever it is,
Yeah.
or even teachers at school, or um, you know, some parents in the gym have mentioned to my parents,
Mm-hmm.
to be able to bring it through some stories, and I think that the same way we do, being able to share it as a story,
Mm-hmm.
as far as like something that happened. Um, they so many things, like so many of the girls will lead a pumpkin carving thing at Halloween with the
Mm-hmm.
younger kids or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And, um, knowing that it's okay to say those things to college coaches, and use those as examples of what they have done. Um,
That's great.
and just in role playing with us, practicing and,
Mm-hmm.
um, sometimes I'll ask the same question three different ways,
Mm-hmm.
so that they're looking at it a different perspective. And then we kind of like, okay, well, let's put all three of those answers together in one, because ultimately I asked the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then they feel a lot more comfortable being able to, um, talk to the college coaches about what they can bring to the team.
I love
But I
those.
think a lot of the
Yeah.
focus for them is the skill stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
think it's a lot harder for them to talk about those qualities that they have.
Yeah. And also, I'd like to add, you can be a leader and be a quiet person. You,
Mm-hmm.
and when I look back on being a head coach, the one of our one of my best athletes as a head coach she was more on the quiet side. But when I would give the assignment, she was the first one, to finish it. She didn't miss a practice. She wasn't late. She didn't get into the drama when, sometimes drama would happen on a team. She didn't do that. And all of a sudden, you can just tell at meets that the girls absolutely want to follow that athlete. She competed hard. She never gave up. but she wasn't the yappy one at, at meetings. She was kind of the quiet one
Hmm.
when we would have team meetings. She didn't need to, say a whole lot because her body, all the things that she did, that they noticed were, not verbal. But I would consider her a leader. So that's a hard one to communicate because, of course, an athlete's going to say, well, I'm a hard worker. How are you a leader? Well, I work really hard. And okay, that's good to say for sure. But I think it's okay. I want to encourage the families out there who have athletes who are quiet that finding ways for them to be able to communicate, they may not be that loud person, but they're going to be on time, they're going to be consistent, they're going to compete hard. They know how to walk up to someone quietly and encourage them when they're struggling. Um, those are really, they're like the glue. I call them the glue to the team, and so I always
Yeah, I
loved
think
having
those
some of those.
first followers are
Mhm.
super important,
Hmm.
because they're the ones that are going to bring the
Yeah,
rest along, and they're the ones that are truly supporting and holding the weight of what those more vocal leaders are trying to do.
yeah. And I just thought it was so interesting because this team, the coaches, college coaches that I was talking to, Division One, last week about this, they were basically saying that's what we're recruiting. Obviously they want the athlete, but whatever, scores and stuff. But they are zeroed in on finding, you know, future athletes for their team that aren't afraid to be a leader and aren't afraid to talk about it on the recruiting trip or on the phone. So that's why I brought it
I
up
think that's going to
because
become even more
Mhm.
important with the
Mm.
portal and with girls
Mhm.
switching teams and things like that. It was very rare to bring
Mhm.
someone from another team into your team.
Yeah.
And it was, you know, coaches were very careful about that because
Mhm.
of not wanting to,
Disrupt.
impact
Yeah,
that team culture that they had created.
right.
And now we have the portal that there are a lot more transfers and a lot more girls coming in, and so I think it's really important. Coaches want to make sure that those athletes coming in have those qualities to help
Mhm.
propel their team to the next level, and can maybe bring those really positive things from their previous team to help level up what that team is trying to do.
Yeah. Okay, here's my last question for you. I know
Okay.
today is a big day. Regionals actually started yesterday for some of the play-ins. And then today, well, no, yeah, yesterday some of them started, but some play-ins
Hmm.
are today, right?
Today.
And
Hmm.
then
And
tomorrow,
then
session one and two,
there's
right?
two
For
regional
some.
session today too.
Right. Yeah. Everyone's doing it a little bit different, depending on where you're going. I know you're going to Kentucky to watch, right?
Hmm.
Are you still going?
Yep.
And I'm going to be headed to Oregon State, Corvallis, tomorrow, actually. So I'm going to put you on the spot. Who do you
Oh.
think? I mean, I'm looking at it because I couldn't even remember who was in it. So who do you think, if you remember? Well, oh, you're going to be watching Oklahoma, maybe, huh? So,
Hmm.
which two teams do you think are going to come out on top at the Kentucky regional?
At my regional,
If you had to
I'm gonna have to
guess.
look up who's all there.
Okay.
Um,
Oklahoma, Kentucky, Ohio State are together. And then Missouri, Arkansas, NC State, Maryland. Oh, wait.
I don't know.
Wait, I forgot. Do they take the winner of each session or do they take top two scores overall? Am I drawing?
No, from each session.
You have to win your session,
So,
right? In the
right.
end. Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So we've got Missouri, Arkansas, NC State, and Maryland.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it would be Missouri and Arkansas. And then the evening session tomorrow is going to be Oklahoma, Kentucky, Ohio State,
That's cool.
and whoever wins from today's play and meet between Central Michigan and
True.
Rutgers.
True.
So I think Oklahoma is
Okay.
obviously the shoe in there.
Obviously. Yeah.
Um, and if I had to pick one, I think I would go with Kentucky. I don't know that I would upset, but Ohio State's NQS is really pretty close to Kentucky.
I
So I
know.
mean, it could go either way. It really could.
Okay.
But I think that afternoon session is a little bit of an
Yeah.
easier thing for the top two teams.
Okay. And I
So then, who are
have,
you going for?
yeah. Well, UCLA, I think, is a clear favorite. And then Alabama's, ranked fifth. Utah's 12th. They've had a little rough year, a little bit, Utah, you know, being 12th.
But they have made every single regional
But
to
they've made
date.
every single, so it's hard, it's really
Mhm.
hard not to think, um, you know, let me think. I don't know why they've had a rough year. I haven't watched their meets. I may have watched their first meet actually on TV, but I don't know enough. Um, I would say probably Alabama out of that and UCLA.
Well, they're going to take two.
Oh, they'll
They're going to
take
take two from
two from
each.
the early session.
Hmm.
Ah, so Utah. Yeah. I don't
And
know. What do
then
you think?
Minnesota, Iowa, or who
Um,
playing?
Minnesota, probably. Although Iowa's been looking really good. They're ranking semi-close. You know, honestly,
I think that's the good thing about gymnastics. Like I always used to tell my team, gymnastics is spelt Today because on any given day, anything can happen.
yep, that's right. That's what's the beauty of this. And we've seen it each year that they've changed this, that it's really who comes to the table, like consistent, the most
Yeah.
consistent. And that's what makes it kind of fun too, I think, especially as people head to nationals. It is so exciting. The four on the floor is just, you
Hmm.
could have been ranked one first all year, but remember, I hate to say it, but Oklahoma had that rough vault session.
Hmm.
Was that 2 years ago? Um, their first event, I think, because they were ranked number one all year. And then I think they missed like five vaults or something.
Hmm.
I mean, like
Yeah.
a lot of vaults they missed, maybe three. I don't know. So
And
you
then
think it's,
Michigan, they won, and then the next year
that's right.
didn't make it.
I know. That's so true.
Penn
Yeah.
State upset them.
So, all of you out there listening to this, be sure you're checking out regionals. It's a great way to take a look at the schools that you are thinking about going to. And, it gives you a great picture, not only of their skill level, but also the culture of the team, I think is huge, and how they've been prepared for today and this weekend.
Hmm.
Yeah. All right, Miss Vicky, thank you for everything. And I appreciate you hopping on here today. I think it's going to be very educational and helpful for, so many. So, some good tips here today.
Good.
And all of you who may have interest in getting help in the recruiting process, we like to start by level 9 here at JH Consulting, or especially by ninth grade. And the key in that is getting you to the right summer camps. Those are not cheap. Travel is getting more expensive right now, and we don't want you to spend an extra penny if we can help you in picking, camps that are going to have a big impact on your connecting with coaches who are realistic for sure. And
And
we like to
especially now with
give,
those roster caps.
and
You
those
don't want to
roster
go to a
caps.
camp where there's not an option, like they don't have a
Yeah.
spot right now.
Yes. Good point.
Mhm.
So all those things we keep in mind. All right. Have fun in Kentucky, and we will
Thank
talk
you.
soon.